Thank you, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Our next item is Santa Clara Convention Center and Convention Visitors Bureau third quarter financial status report. City Manager, or are we going to hear from the Convention Center?
I'd like to invite the General Manager up, Lisa Moreno, in the event that she has any comments, but this is just a note and file item.
Okay, Lisa, did you want to make a presentation?
I'm here to answer any questions that you have. This is the quarterly report that we had revised some time ago to provide more financial information that had been requested by the council from previous years. Does anybody have any questions as it relates to the report?
Okay, hold on a second.
It does go over the Convention Center and the CVB quarterly report.
Jennifer, I can't see the speakers on this item. Okay, thank you. No. Anyone from the council have any questions? No? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any member of the public that has any questions on the quarterly report? All right, is there a motion to note and file?
Second.
Motion to note and file, second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item we have is a action on a contract for the Reed Street, Grand Street Sports Park project and related budget amendment. Welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. Happy to be here tonight for the award of the Reed and Grant Street Sports Park project. It's an exciting project, and it's going to be a great project for the city of Santa Clara. So just wanted to run through the location of the park. As you see in the center of the screen in green, the park is bounded by Reed Street, Grant Street, Lafayette, and the railroad tracks. Wanted to touch a little bit on the outreach and input for the project. It's gone on since 2013, and just really a reminder, I'm not going to go through all the different items, but just a reminder of the effort that's gone into the project. There's been a lot of commission meetings, council meetings, public meetings, meetings with property owners. So a lot of work. We've talked about the project a lot, gone through schematic designs, property acquisitions, and it really led us to where we are tonight. So yes, we are awarding or seeking approval to award approximately a $20 million contract, but it just didn't happen quickly. A lot of history to the project. In terms of the site plan for the project, you can see here the soccer fields on the right-hand part of the screen. There's 4 of them. It's a synthetic turf field for those 4. The soccer field on the left-hand side of the screen is a real turf project. And I mentioned soccer fields for the most times of the year we'll be playing soccer on. They also have some other functions with summer camps and different activities during some of the other months of the year. The project also contains a neighborhood building that has a recreational room associated with it. The park itself is 10 acres, 4,000 square foot building with about 1,700 square foot for a community room. Includes offices as well as electrical rooms, bathrooms, men's and women's, as well as a concession stand. I will add that there's also a maintenance building over by the dog park, and associated with that is restrooms for that facility. There's 2 parking lots to support the facilities, and there's lighting, children's playground. And one last thing I just wanted to note, you can see on the center of the screen the rectangle in white. That's a piece of property that is not owned by the city that we'll be constructing the park around. In terms of the city council meetings that have gone on for this project, I just wanted to highlight 3 of them. In 2016, approval of the final schematic design in April. October 2016, discussion on the acquisition of the 1750 Grant Street purchase, as well as an update on the design. And then lastly, in March of 2017, the CEQA documents were brought forward for resolution approval. And that was associated with the environmental aspects of the project. So here's a perspective view of the project, looking at the corner of Grant and Reed Street. You can see the lighted soccer fields, as well as the sidewalk that goes around the front part of the project, the parking lots there, the neighborhood building that's in more to the center of the right of the screen. So really a nice facility. It'll be a great project, and it'll provide a lot of opportunity for the youth. Some of the other perspective views, so showing some of the trees, mature trees, how it'll look in some years to come. But on the top left, you see a picture looking down on the neighborhood building with the soccer fields on the right. And looking in the top right is a view through the quad area at the children's playground. And then that children's playground shown a little more detail on the left. And then lastly, on the bottom right, a picture of the walkways in between the fields and the building. So in terms of bidding for the project, on February 14th, 2018, the project was advertised. It also had a pre-bid meeting on the 21st of February. We did a lot of outreach to contractors, to building exchanges to try and drum up a lot of interest for the project. And ultimately on March 28th, 2018, bids were opened. We received 3 bids on the project that are shown here. O.C. Jones and Sons is the apparent low bidder at a cost of $20,195,000. McGuire and Hester submitted a bid of $20,907,000, and Robert A. Bothman Construction a bid of $21 million. In terms of overall funding for the project, on the left-hand side, you see the construction contract cost, the contingency. It brings a total of $22,215,000. So in terms of the funding sources, there's currently $12 million available in the Youth Soccer Field and Athletic Facilities Fund. And so that leaves a delta of approximately $10,215,000. What staff is recommending is to fund that through a loan from the capital project reserves. And the goal would be to transfer that and then fund it through the Mitigation Fee Act. And what that is developer funding associated with the developments that fund parks. And so as time permits through various projects that are coming, we can pay that back. And so when we look at what's on the horizon for projects, it seems like that could be paid back within 3 to 4 years, we're speculating. So in terms of overall staff recommendation, we're recommending the transfer of the loan from the capital project reserve for $10,215,000. Also awarding the contract to O.C. Jones for $20,195,000. And also authorizing the city manager to execute all documents associated with the project, and also to execute change orders in the amount of $2.02 million. So that concludes the staff presentation.
Okay, are there Vice Mayor Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation and the update. It's really exciting to see this finally going forward. I have a couple of questions, though. Since we last met and talked about this in March of 2017, my family adopted a dog, and so we use that dog park the dog park that's adjacent to where the soccer fields are going to be going in. So we use it almost every day. And so I
Is that
have,
the Gamma Dog Park?
yes, and I think Mr. Gamma is here in the audience. And I believe a couple other friends from the park, including little Harry, is here too, and one of Bear's friends. So anyway, I have a couple of questions, because obviously some of the park users are concerned. And so if you could answer some of those questions for me. The first one would be, how will the dog park be impacted during the construction of the soccer park?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's obviously going to be some impacts. It's a large construction project that's
Yeah.
being built around it. However, the goal is to keep that facility open as best we can. I mean, there may be some periods where we may have to do some temporary closures or things like that. We have to work through all those details with the contractor, but the goal is to keep that facility open as best we can.
Okay. I know it's very exciting to know that, with the additional parking that's going in there now. I mean, right now, the parking lot is a dirt parking lot, and I think there's 30 parking spots. But to have a paved parking lot for, I think it's 74 parking spots, that's really exciting. I mean, it'll be a joint use between the soccer park and the dog owners. Do you foresee that the dog park could possibly be used for storage space or equipment?
We're utilizing the dog park for
Yes, sir.
construction
Yeah.
storage, or I don't believe that's the plan at this
Okay.
time.
Okay, that was one of the questions that came up. And then in relation to the the construction of the new parks, the soccer parks, do you I mean, currently, the dog parks are about an acre and a half, between the large dog park and the small dog park. It's about an acre and a half. Has any of that space been taken away? It was hard to tell on the maps. Has any of the dog park space been lost as a result of the reconfiguration of the soccer park, the new soccer parks?
Yeah, based on my understanding, no,
Everything is staying the same?
that's correct.
Okay, good. And then, would it be possible, I mean, the dog park is so popular that, I've seen pictures of when it was first opened, and the park was just so green and lush with grass, and now it's just dirt. It's dirt and dust. Is it possible that with this project taking place, that is it possible that we could take care of some maintenance, like new grass, or possibly, I understand there's something called canine turf. Could we look into try and doing both at the same time and fix them both up together?
So right now, that would not be included, what's on the agenda for tonight for this project approval.
Okay, okay. But do you think it's something that we could look at, maybe down the road? Like I said, it's a well-utilized park.
Sure, I mean, ultimately, yeah, something could be looked at and then proposed as part of a budget process.
Okay, okay. I think those are all the questions I have for now, though I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Craig, mine's was real quick. Capital Project Reserve, I know we changed names on things. Is this our land reserve money, loan? No.
Yeah, I'd have to defer. I don't believe it's
Walter?
the,
Because it says loan, so I was wondering. And then my next question was, the parcel that we do not own, how are we going to camouflage that from the rest of the?
yeah, you see, we have planted, I'll pull that slide up. So it shows some of the trees that were planted around it. That's what we've done to try and camouflage that. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, hopefully someday the city could purchase that, but right now that's not an option. It's not for sale.
We know that. So what is in there right now? Is it just level, or is there a building in there, or?
There's some structures there.
There
Yeah.
is structures there. Okay, so that's why I just asked, how do we fix this so that kids don't get over, Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So we did receive an email from Calista Seni, and she had some good questions. I don't know if you had a chance to see the email that she sent. So she's
No, I
asked.
did not.
Okay, so it was given to the council. And Jim maybe would know this first question, but so I was going to ask her questions because I thought they were good ones. What are the mitigation fee act revenues collected to date in the city? Does anybody happen to know that? Or Jim, do you know?
We can come back with a more full report, but I think council knows that we received over 11, it's probably $12 million. One of them came in from the Irvine Santa Clara Square project. Some of that was allocated to the purchase of one of the 1750 parcels, so 550,000 of that. We have several other projects that have come in under there, so I don't have the exact number, but we can come back with another report.
Okay, so then it says, which current and planned projects will generate MFA fees that will apply to this site? Well, I think it's just, I don't know if we've targeted those yet, but it would, a specific project, or,
Again, we can provide the ones that are coming in. There have been several projects that have been approved, but they haven't pulled their permits yet. So you've approved projects, and we can show the nexus between those projects and this particular project site.
so the last question was, can and should the council pre-commit future neighborhood park fees? Like, I guess this idea that we're gonna be, we've kind of swapped money around to, and I know we've been wanting to get this park started for years, so I'm really anxious to do that, but is there any restriction about pre-committing funds or?
We did take a look at the legal issue there, and I think you can do this. The question of whether you should do this is a different question, but I think you can do this.
Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Those are just I just wanted to, because I thought she raised some interesting questions, so thank you. I'm excited to see the park begin and come to fruition.
Thank you, Councilmember Mahan.
Thanks. A couple questions. What is our land sale reserve fund currently?
So the current balance is 39.3 million. With this drawdown, we'd be left at 29.1 million.
Okay, thanks. Will this loan be an interest-bearing loan between the two?
Yes, an interfund loan should have an
will be.
interest assigned.
Okay. To make up for the loss of
Walter's saying full
returns.
interest.
I like the way Walter thinks. Thank you. Last, just procedural questions. Do we have to take each one of these three recommendations separately, or can we take them all together?
I mean, again, whenever you have multiple actions like this, you need to make sure that you're all going to vote the same way. I think on the third item, you would need 5 votes because it's a budget item.
Okay. Well, then I would take them independently and ask if the council's ready for motions. I'm ready to move approval.
All right, you can hold that motion just for a second. I had a question. So the parcel that we're not able to purchase at this time, and I'm glad to see we were able to purchase those other parcels because there was a time period where we were not going to be able to purchase all of them. So excellent job getting, control of those. Is that going to be additional parking, or what will that be when we eventually hopefully acquire that at some point in the future?
Sure, and during the process, I think they looked at different options of how that would fit in. I think one of the suggestions was maybe to look at a future gymnasium out there. Those were some of the thoughts, but I think if that property were to be purchased, then I think we'd go back through the process and see what's
Find
best
some
fit
options.
and, yeah, what we can afford.
Okay, and then the restrooms, are they open for the dog park?
The two restrooms, there's going to be 2 sets of restrooms. So one will be in the neighborhood room, and the other set will be constructed out by the dog park for the dog park.
Okay, and will there be, maybe this is a management question, I guess, but when it's built, we'll talk about that. Will there be someone on site all the time at this facility? Jim, yes? Okay. I think that's important to make sure that for security, safety, and, vandalism, it's good to have someone on site for a facility like this to protect it, yeah.
So similar to youth soccer park, that's what our intent is. We do have ongoing maintenance, and particularly because of the synthetic fields. Secondly, there will be programming that we're planning during the day, both contract classes, as Craig mentioned earlier, the summer camp programs, and then also adult industrial league during the day. So from an 11 to 2, and then the kids get out, and they would be there from 2:30 all the way through 10 p.m. And then on the dog park, since it would be a lit facility now, it would also remain open till 10 p.m.
Okay, and my last question is, we received a letter, an email from a company that provides turf, and they were questioning our selection for the type of turf that we bid out on this project. Do you have a comment on that?
So we had two turf manufacturers that in the end were available for the contractors to bid on. We allow or equals, and so contractors were able to submit. Our designer had developed specifications. There was one field turf that was named in the specifications, and there was the approved equal. Based on the submittals, there was another product that was deemed an approved equal, and so those were both able for the contractors to bid on.
Okay, all right, thank you. So Councilmember Mahan, did you want to make your motion? Oh, we can go to let's go to the public first. So, let's see here. Is there any speakers? Any member of the public? If you'd like to speak, please come forward. Welcome.
Councilman, Mayor, City Manager, and all of you lovely people up there. Again, I'm here to thank you for what you did a few years back, a year or so ago. Bring you a little update. Max was with me that night when these people did what they did. And I just wanted to say that unfortunately I lost Max because he picked up a raunchy old tennis ball that came down with a disease, and we had to put him to sleep. So I'm very concerned about our dog park, always. Right now, I adopted another dog. She's an 8-year-old. Her name is Miranda, and she is a pest. She wants to be at the dog park at 4:30 every day. And if I don't go, she harasses me. But anyway, I just want to tell you that the people that I meet out there, they're wonderful. And everyone just loves that park. And it gets used. As you can see, it just goes to pot quite frequently. If we had it big enough, let's say like a golf course, the grass would probably hold up. But under the circumstances, it has a hard time. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you and thank Mr. Sheriff and Dale for a great team we have in the city, especially for you and our Parks Commissioners. And hopefully I know this is gonna be a spillover. What's happening here is the soccer park is gonna affect our dog park, and we're gonna have a top-notch dog park. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Gamma. Welcome.
Thank you. Tino Silva, President of Santa Clara Youth Soccer and a current member of the Parks Rec Commission. One of my, as a Park Rec Commissioner, one of the honors was being able to make the nomination, or make the motion to name the park after Ray. And I think you know why. He's extremely passionate about the dog park. I want to make sure that people also understand that this is not just a soccer park, that this is also bringing the dog park up to something that's a little bit more respectable. There'll be lights. I believe there's going to be lights. So people can actually go until the park closes, which would be between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. So that gives us another 3 or 4 hours of access, at least in the non-summer months. There's over 2,000 kids that play soccer between Santa Clara Youth and PAL. And what this does is this gives an opportunity for the younger kids who aren't able to play at the soccer park yet because they're not old enough to play on the big field. This is going to give them an opportunity to play on a world-class field at age 10 and 11 and 12 that we currently don't have. Right now, we use the school district, and I don't know if you're aware, but the school district is going to start charging all the organizations, youth organizations, to use their fields. Little League, Santa Clara Youth Soccer, PAL, they're going to be, their goal is to implement fees, and supposedly there's a 6-month, I read today, in the minutes, there's a 6-month waiting period, so they're not going to start the fee process until the beginning of 2019. But this park is, I talked to my board of directors, is extremely important because we've spent $140,000 on fixing Curtis Field, and now we're going to have to pay more on top of that to use it. So that's a whole other issue. The other piece about the turf is that I think, Jim, at the commission level, we looked at all different types of turf. So it isn't that we just, threw a dart out there. We looked at quite a bit, and the turf that's going to go in there, I think, is kind of state of the art. It's really, really good stuff. So anyways, thank you for moving this forward, and let's get it built.
Thank you. Thanks for your work on the Parks Commission. Welcome.
So a few years ago, I was a big proponent of stepping up the parks impact fees. And a couple of council meetings ago, there was a new proposal for a new parks impact fee. I want to impress upon you the fact that these parks are getting more and more expensive. Land is getting more and more expensive. So we really need to adopt those fees. And then the other thing that I've suggested for some time is that the city work with the school district to figure out how we can turf some of the fields. The city would pay for some of the turfing of fields and then collaborate and use that land on the weekends and evenings for games and other activities. So I'm just trying to impress upon you to adopt this stepped-up parks impact fee because we desperately need more parks. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are following through on those suggestions of the joint use. We might be going a little backwards, but now we're got more to talk about. Welcome,
Hi.
both of you. Yeah.
Guy's the more important one of us. So I only have two little concerns, and I just want to know if it's being addressed. Currently, out on Reed Street and Grant Street, there's a bunch of abandoned vehicles, most of them RVs. There's a couple RVs that people live in full-time. Are those being addressed? Because we've tried to have those RVs hauled off, and it hasn't happened. And the other concern I have is with little children. Small dogs, especially terriers, see some little kid running, they're going to bite. It's just the way it is. And eventually, little kids are going to see dogs in a dog park. They're going to walk into the dog park. They're going to run in front of the wrong dog and get bit. And I don't want to see it happening. So is there any plans to put up a sign saying no unattended children in the dog park? That's my two concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. About the sign of the no unattended children in the dog park?
Yeah, so with those two comments, so I know at last council meeting, a gentleman had came and talked about some of the vehicles around the Reed Grant Street area. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at here in the next few weeks is an option for how we deal with that and how we move forward, obviously, not only for the complaints right now, but during construction as well. So we'll be looking at that. In terms of the sign, certainly we can look at what options are available for putting out signs of something about the children in the dog parks, things like that.
I remember we used to have the dog park at Curtis School, and it was next to where the kids played soccer and, yeah, and baseball and all that, so. Okay, and then did you talk about the RVs on, because that's code enforcement, so.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at in the short term on how we deal with that whole area in terms of the parking, the RVs.
Okay, city manager?
We're going to come back with an update through the city manager blog.
Okay, great, thank you. Vice Mayor Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, there was a gentleman that was here last week that brought up the issue and had some pictures, and
Right.
so there was going to be follow-up on it. No, it's a really good, thank you for bringing up the issue about the sign, because one of the additions to the the soccer park is there's going to be a playground or a tot lot or something out there, isn't there? So all the more reason definitely to have, a sign up there, because it's going to be right adjacent to the small dog park area. So that's a very good suggestion. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was that I think I read that there's going to be a full-time employee hired once the park is finished. So there'll be somebody out there
Oversight.
maintaining it. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public? All right, Councilmember Mahan, you have your motion.
Yes, to take these recommendations in order. The first is to award the Public Works contract for the Reed Street, Grant Street Sports Park project to the lowest responsive bidder and lowest responsive and responsible bidder, O.C. Jones and Sons, Inc., in the amount of $20,195,000, and authorize the city manager to execute any and all documents associated with and necessary for the award, completion, and acceptance of this project.
Second.
There's a motion, second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen, for all your work on this project, and Dale back there. I know you had a lot to
Yeah.
do with it as well. Thank you.
The second action is to authorize the city manager to execute change orders up to approximately 10% of the original contract price, or $2,019,500, for a total not to exceed amount of $22,214,500.
Second.
Motion second. Please register your vote. And that also passes unanimously.
And the third action is to approve the budget amendment transferring $10,214,500 from the land sale reserve to youth soccer field and athletic facilities program to be repaid with future mitigation fee act revenue. And I would just like to add to that, that the loan will bear interest and that the council will get an update on the loan repayment, at least on a semi-annual basis. Just something to keep our eye on the ball.
That makes sense.
Second.
Motion second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. I think, was that the last one? Okay. All right, thank you, everyone, on that. Okay, next we have adopt ordinance number 1980, establishing district boundaries and sequencing related to implementing by-district elections in Santa Clara. The clerk, who has this? City attorney? Is there a report on this?
This is the second reading of the
Oh, the
ordinance.
second reading.
So we've
Okay.
already published in accordance with the code and the charter, and so we're ready for the final adoption of the districting.
Oh, did I skip something?
You did.
Oh, so sorry. Let's go back then. City charter options for vacant council seat. I'm sorry about that. Who has this? Jennifer? Manager? Attorney? City attorney?
Yes, so last week, I put up our charter section, which says that you had 30 days since last Tuesday to either appoint a council member or to, if you did not do so within 30 days, then there would be an election to fill the seat in November. So that's basically the situation that you're in, and so we wanted to hear back from you as to what process you would like to follow at this point.
Okay. Councilmember Mahan, you're first up.
Thank you. As outlined in the report to us, we have two options. We can appoint someone to the position prior to June 14th, so I imagine that would mean we go through a process of inviting applicants to apply for the vacant position, and at some point, we would take a council vote on making the appointment. The other option is to leave the position vacant until the November 2018 election. Staff's not making any recommendation, but, you know, given the recent events that have affected our city, given the political climate of our city at this point, given the fact that we have made appointments in the past and don't have a fully representative council seated up here at this point, I really feel strongly that we must go out to an election. We can't have 5 people being the only ones making the appointment to fill this vacancy. It's far too important to Santa Clara's future. The only fair thing to do is to have a full and fair, transparent election, hard fought, let all comers come. Let us have an open debate. Some of the recent events may become issues of this election, and they should be, and they could be. And that kind of open political discourse can start healing our city. So my motion is to leave the position vacant until the November 2018 election.
Motion second. All right, or Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Back in 2016, we had 4 ballot measures, and one of them that passed dealt with the issue of appointing people to the council. And it was well thought out. It was put together by, a great team of the Charter Review Committee. And it was what was put forth, for our city to follow in the event that there was an opening on this council. And it was adopted by 80% of the city. Obviously, our voters supported that, and that is what we should be addressing, and that is what we should be doing. To go out for a special election, I think I read something recently where in Sunnyvale, they had a special election that ran them over $750,000. Our budget does not have the ability to absorb a cost like that, and it would be a real waste of taxpayer money, especially since we have a measure in place to take care of this issue. So I would not be supporting that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
I was going to make some of the same points that Vice Mayor Watanabe just made. And I think that we're talking about 6 months. I read the letter that our former planning commissioner Byron Fleck wrote, and I thought he had a lot of good points and really had thought things out quite a bit in some of his legal arguments about, that the charter is telling us it's like the first thing that we should do is work on appointing somebody. And, I realize he's not our city attorney, but he had some interesting thoughts in his letter about, that our first action should be to appoint. And I guess there could be some questions. I don't know. I apologize for not asking this before, but city attorney, do you know, does the elections code have any requirements? Do we know if we are, if we have the option to, we could leave it open for 6 months vacant? I mean, in the situation with our city clerk and in the past with the chief of police, we've always appointed somebody to, when we had those vacancies, so we haven't, in my memory, I can't remember leaving something open for as long as 6 months. Do you know if even if our charter is kind of silent a little bit on that issue, is there something else like in the state elections code that would apply? Do you happen to know?
Well, the way it works is
Or
this:
Jennifer, do you know?
a charter city can put into their charter when they can help, when they can or should hold elections. And our charter is silent on that. So you would go back to the elections code, and the elections code provides for elections on the dates in the state elections code. And the next date that you could have an election for this council seat would be November. I know people have been referring to Sunnyvale, but Sunnyvale has a different charter provision. And so they were, because of the operation of their particular charter, and they had certain time limits, about 180 days, that required them, because of the way the resignation fell in Sunnyvale, the vacancy fell in Sunnyvale, they had to have a special election, and that did cost them quite a bit of money.
So we don't have the option of having an election in July or August?
I don't.
That's not an option for us.
It's not provided for in our charter. So if you look at the elections code, there doesn't seem to be any way for us to do that, except have it on the next election day when there's time to do it. We can't do it in June because there's just not enough time to put it on the consolidated with the June election. So the next election that we could have an election would be November. That's just the way our charter is written in terms of when we can hold elections.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. Well, I want to hear what the public has to say and the rest of my council colleagues, but, we did have our charter review committee, and they had made they felt, with the changing, some of the issue about wanting not to have, factions or whatever by making increasing the level of majority that was required to 4/5, that like with 6 of us, that means 5 out of 6. I mean, that's pretty substantial number would have to approve an appointment. And that was passed with like 80% of the vote. So it seemed like a lot of the community was willing to give the council the authority to do that if we had a supermajority indicating approval. But like I said, I'll be curious to hear what everybody else has to say and what members of the public before voting on the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis? Well, I want to finish with the council first.
Oh, okay. So, hold on. I did some research and, found that back in 2010, that a motion was made by Councilmember Mahan to declare the city council vacant, and then a motion made to accept the applications for candidates interested in receiving an appointment. So in the interest of transparency and doing the right thing, and I know that we have this 4/5 vote, I think that we can do this. I think that there's enough people out there that understand that we will probably go with the second district or something like that. Well, I think this will work out. So I really like to go and have this appointment done and put the applications out as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just a point of clarification, sorry. I thought I had my light on.
Go ahead.
I just want to clarify, so that we do not need to go to a special election. This would just be part of our general election in November 2018.
Because the term of the seat vacated is November, it won't be a special election. You'll just be having, it'll just be the regular election in November 18 for this particular seat.
So there won't be the extraordinary cost of a special election like Sunnyvale experienced.
I think we still have to pay for the
Well, yeah,
cost
but-
of holding the election.
But we'll have 2 other seats on that.
No, it won't be. It
Yeah.
won't be an out of sequence special election in that sense. That's correct.
Thank you.
I think that some of the correspondence we got was that our charter, it's actually not silent. It says the election should be held forthwith, which means immediately. So that's the interpretation of what that means, immediately, how you interpret that. But I think that, as was pointed out, it's well within our purview here to appoint to the city council. In fact, we have the very last election where 80% of our voters said yes, it's okay for the council to appoint with 5 out of 6 members of the council. I don't think that is a huge mandate that's recent. And so I think that 80% of the people that voted would disagree with the motion on the table right now and we had a huge turnout in that election, an absolute huge turnout. So our public is well aware of what we're doing, and they voted and they stamped that they give us the ability to do that. The seat would only be for a 6-month period, and that person would have to run for office, or maybe they choose not to run, but the appointment would be for 6 months. This council has had numerous absences for many reasons, and we've had to run on less than a full council, and I fear if we leave that seat vacant for 6 months and the council members that are absent, many times, will leave, a core council that's going to have a difficult time doing our job. So I know that we have many members of the public that would like to serve up here, and I think we should give them an honest opportunity to come forward and declare their interest in an expeditious manner, and allow a member of the public who would like to serve on this council. So I'm really in favor of what 80% of our voters told us we should do, and move forward with that. So going to the public, we have William Davis and Rohan K after that. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and the council.
Good evening.
I really came up here tonight, I was really going to voice my opinion, and I'm still going to voice my opinion. I'm totally against appointing anybody to this council seat. We are a democratic country. We don't run by appointments. Appointments are done in China or somewhere else. Wherever they came up with this idea of appointments, it might fit in some situations, but I don't believe it really fits in this one. And they dressed the part were 4/5. The idea behind it was to make it hard, not easy, to appoint somebody. Now, if some people get together and say, well, we're going to appoint this person, then that really cheats the whole system. And on top of that, you're talking about the election being required to be immediately. Our charter section 600.02 consolation, consolation, I can't even get that word out. Anyway, it says any special election may be with great, I'm getting messed up.
Consolidated? Is that it?
You're consolidated, that's the word I was looking for. Consolidated, and any municipal election may be consolidated with the state, county, and school district elections within the city as part of or which would in any case involve one ballot needed be printed for such consolidated elections. So you said that it means immediate. That section right there overrules that. It doesn't say immediate. So I think we need to really sit back and look at this issue. We don't need an appointment. We need an elected official up there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Rohan, please come forward. And then Jeannie Mahan. And then after that, I don't have any other cards. But you'll be able to speak. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't know why I don't mean to waste my time, but I was on the Charter Review Committee when we put that in the charter about election or appointment. I just want to maybe say that never in my wildest dreams that I think we would be having an empty seat under these circumstances, which I think are very unusual and very hard for our city. That said, in the manner of transparency and openness, I really do think that it should go out to the citizens because I think this has hurt our city, and I think letting the citizens have their say would be a way of healing and bringing this to closure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. Good evening.
Susan Salinas, I'm almost a lifetime resident in Santa Clara. The voters approved the charter 80% approval rate. You've got the voice of most of the citizens of this city. It's a short-term appointment. I think you're running a risk not putting someone in place. November, we can hear from the voters again on who they want. So I think it makes the most sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come forward, anyone. Welcome.
Adams, over 50-year voting resident of this city. Why is it that we, okay, first off, is it seat 7 or seat 5 that is vacant?
I'm not sure what that.
No, when the voting, when Mr. Caserta was voted in, what was the seat that he was running for?
We'll try to find that. You can go ahead with your comments.
Well, it's important to what I'm about to say. The person who was second to him, or if that person is not willing to come forward now and take that position, then perhaps, I don't know how many people were there, but if there was 4 competing for that seat, spending time, effort, and all that, those persons are still most probably alive in this city, may still be interested in having that seat. And I think out of all fairness, rather than just willy-nilly picking somebody out And believe me, right now, there's a lot of suspicion about this council among many of us. We don't come forward like we should. And I apologize for that. But we need some sense of fairness. So perhaps can you look into this and see if there is somebody who wanted this, who worked very hard to get the seat and didn't get it. And believe me, I don't have any idea who that person may be, so I don't have a thing for them. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we know what seat number that was?
It was seat number 5.
Number 5. Thank you.
You know, so I know somebody who worked really hard and didn't get it, but that's okay. That's the way it goes. Nevertheless, I was on the Charter Review Committee. I've been on the Charter Review Committee twice now, and we did put this in for a specific reason. I remember when Councilmember Marsali was ill, and he was out for months on end, and it became really difficult to govern with 6. It was tough. It was hard. And I agree with Councilman Mahan that we always want to bring this, involve the public as much as we can. We want to empower the public, which is why we kept the recommendation for the police chief and the clerk to be elected. But in this instance, I think that it's appropriate for 2 reasons. One, I think 6 months without that seat being filled it's just not, it's not appropriate. And it makes your job much harder. And I think this is also an opportunity to, in light of Measure A, to appoint a minority candidate to that seat. And I think that that's an opportunity that I know we've been accused, the city has been accused of being racist. The city's there's been a lot of different accusations that have been made towards the city. So perhaps this is a time to be able to look at that and from the appointment, perhaps have a minority candidate fill that seat. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Please come forward. Everyone sits in the back that wants to talk.
Of course, that's where you
Welcome.
see all the action, right? To the gentleman who wondered who stood on that election against Mr. Caserta, the 2 people were Roseanne Lecourtier and Kevin Park. Thank you. And Kevin came in second. And had that been a preferential voting system, who knows where that would have gone? Maybe Lecourtier would have got up. Maybe it would have been Kevin. That being said, I think you have to remember that Kevin still is a member of this city, and I'm sure he's very interested in putting his hat in the ring. And while he's not here at the moment, that's because he's overseas. But I would say that it's time for this council to do what they've done in the past. Why change it up? You have direction from the residents, so you can do that. You can stick to the charter as it is. I was on that charter review. Nothing's idealistic. We know that in life, unfortunately. Things happen, life occurs. This has been a very unfortunate situation, and it's a dreadful situation. And as I said last week, it is a time to heal. It is a time to move on, and you have an opportunity to make a difference. All of you have an opportunity, and to stand up. And if I was more Australian, I'd tell you how to stand up, but I won't.
We won't ask about that. Thank you very much. Please come forward. Good evening.
Sam Hagag here. I also was on the Charter Review Committee, and I think that change was actually my recommendation. It's important for everybody to recognize that before that charter amendment, all that was needed was a simple majority. And what we debated at length in the Charter Review Committee was that we wanted to make it harder for people to get appointed, right? We wanted to make it harder. We wanted to make it a more democratic process. Before, filling an appointment that appointee would serve for the remainder of the term, even if it was 3 years or 3.5 years. We made 2 changes, and we're only talking about one of them now because that's the only one that applies. But the other change that we made was that no matter when the appointment happened, that seat had to go up for election at the next general election, period. So if somebody resigned or left the council, or even chief of police or city clerk, in the first 2 years of their 4-year term, that seat would have to go up to the election, and then whoever won that election would just serve a partial 2-year term. So the committee really was super invested in making sure that voters had a say, that voters have a say, and that they get to say as soon as possible. The second thing that we did was that we made it extremely difficult to appoint somebody, and that the only way that you would appoint somebody is if you had near consensus. Near consensus. A 4/5 vote on a 6-person council is 5 votes. If it was a chief of police or a city clerk that was vacant, it would be 6 out of the 7 votes. That's what 4/5 makes. Let's happen. So the idea behind that is that you would get a consensus candidate, somebody that everybody would agree, almost everybody would agree to, and not somebody that would be divisive. So I think the voters said 80% yes on this change to make it more restrictive. I think let the process play itself out. And if you don't get 5 votes, then the seat does remain vacant until November. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. Good evening.
Just to be clear, I'm here speaking as a Santa Clara resident. So I actually agree with Councilmember Mahan that I'm not a big fan of the appointment process. I do like candidates who've been submitted to the voters. I prefer an election where there's competition between at least 2 candidates, so that there is a competition, that the voters get a chance to weigh in. But I also feel like in this case, you don't want to leave the seat vacant for 6 months. So I think there's a couple of suggestions that I might have in order to balance that desire that the person be vetted with the desire to fill the seat. The first suggestion would be that you appoint someone who has run for the office before, someone who has stepped up, put their hat in the ring, been out and met voters, especially given the circumstances under which you're appointing, has been under public scrutiny and survived that. And demonstrated their commitment to holding this office. I think that would be my biggest suggestion to you, is to appoint someone who has run for this office before. But I also realize that you may not be able to get to agreement on any of those people who have run for office before, but who might be interested in applying this time. So if you can't find someone to meet that criteria, I would suggest that you look for an appointment for someone who pledges not to run again in November. The power of incumbency, if you appoint someone, they're running as an appointed incumbent, that power is so great, it can make what the voters see in November a little unbalanced. So I think there are people who might be willing to step in, serve for 6 months so that you have a full city council, but then pledge not to run in November, so that the voters can pick from a selection of candidates who don't have that incumbency behind them. Those are the 2 suggestions I'd make. Thank you.
Thank you for those suggestions. Anyone else? Please come forward. Good evening again.
Hi. First, I wanted to congratulate you for doing something out of the San Jose playbook and moving the biggest topic to the very end and making us wait until 11:30.
Oh, we're not at the end of our agenda.
Yeah, but congrats. That was a nice move. I wanted to go to that. It seemed like some of you were confused on the topic and not really up to date on it, and arguing with the city attorney, which I thought was hilarious. I don't know. I would think that they would know more. And then the whole thing about absences and somebody was sick and it's so hard to have 6 people. I'm like, you can do it with 5, you can do it with 4. So I was just a little confused on that. It just sounds, you guys made it so telenovela, like, oh my God, 6 people, how will we carry on? And 3 of you were appointed. And so obviously you guys like to appoint people because you were appointed. So I would think that that's a streak that needs to end, because you're also all a lighter shade of pale, and that definitely needs to end. An appointee has advantages. So come November, if somebody's put in right now, they have an advantage. And even if it's somebody that's appointed that pledges not to run, we hear all the time, somebody pledges not to run and then whoopsies, I decided I'm gonna run. So I totally oppose having somebody appointed. I oppose having somebody appointed because 3 of you were already appointed. And then some of you will say, oh, well, I have a tie to this kind of community. So therefore, I'm not as white as I appear. You're still white. And this community definitely needs some representation, people of color, LGBTQ, and we don't see that. And I think you're going to appoint somebody who's just like you, and that's how you got appointed, and it's going to go on and on. The cycle needs to end. It needs to end now. So please don't appoint somebody. Wait for an election. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Similar but different circumstances from my last visit to all of you. And, you know, one thing that is concerning and a little worrisome in a way is how comfortable some of you sat up there tonight talking about how good you think an appointment could be. That's kind of worrisome when we think about all the things that are going on, when we're thinking about either how all of you look, how the lawsuit is going on, how Measure A is there. I mean, there's a lot of things, and it's just like, sure, 80% of people called for this four-fifths option, but when they voted on that, they didn't think the abhorrent and disgusting behavior of a council member would force that person to just unexpectedly resign. And then on top of that, talk about all these issues about diversity. I mean, what are we going to do on the other side? Be like, oh, well, hey, you're black. Do you want the seat? We're going to put diversity up there. I mean, that's like political opportunism and just diversity by force that just seems so disgusting that, like, I'd rather see the city go to the election in November and have the city stand up and say that, well, you know, maybe we are a little implicit bias and we don't want to select a person of color, and further prove that the city's governance and electoral process is flawed. And yeah, there's 3 of you that hold an appointment. And there are people that you have seen and you have held on how that gives an advantage to you. That gives you a success to then go and run for office. And like, it's not about condemning the service that anybody who's been appointed has done. It's sure, it's great. You've done some good things. It's not about that. But in this circumstances and in this situation, I mean, just appointment just seems like such a wrong decision to make when with everything that's going on, and 6 months of an empty seat is better than 6 months of putting the wrong person on there that then could have a better opportunity to get elected and be on that for 4 more years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So, Councilmember Mahan?
Yes, thank you. There's been some very good points made here tonight. A couple of points of my own. You say 6 months, it sounds like a long time, but I looked at the council calendar. It's 18 meetings before the council seat would be filled with an election. 18 meetings, even if the meetings are 10 hours, which sometimes they are, that's 180 hours of council work. That's hardly, in the scheme of things, a huge gap. Certainly, the city council can govern effectively with some seat being vacant for maybe 180 hours at the most. I was a little saddened to hear former council member Jerry Marcelli's name used in this context. We all know he suffered from cancer in the last year of his service here, a disease which eventually took his life. And to say that he was absent and maybe should have been replaced is just untoward. I know you're out there watching, Jerry, so give us some strength. There's no requirements for qualifying for an appointment. We don't have to give it to the next runner-up, to somebody who's already run for office, to somebody who's already served in another capacity in the city. So although it's a nice thing to say, sure, we should look at the next runner-up, and maybe that is the proper person for an appointment for that reason, it's not incumbent upon this council to make that selection in that manner, nor is it incumbent upon this council to make a selection based on someone who promises, I'm only going to serve for 6 months and I promise I won't run, so this will be an open seat in November. Even if somebody makes that promise to get the appointment, there's no way to force that. He could change his mind, and who would know? It wouldn't matter. And we all know that the incumbency gives a candidate a great advantage. So we're not looking at a 6-month appointment. Chances are we're looking at an 8-year and 6-month appointment. And that's where I draw the line. It's not fair, especially as been pointed out here in these circumstances. I don't know why there's 4 people insisting on an appointment. I really don't get it. You talk about transparency, you talk about honesty, you talk about democracy, you talk about open government, you talk about good governance. We have a chance to make all of those things happen. We have a chance to live up to those ideals and make Santa Clara a better place, a stronger place for facing an election. And what do we want to do? The majority wants to just appoint this empty seat. And as I say, it's not a 6-month appointment. Let's be real. It's an 8-year, 6-month appointment. And that's just not fair to our residents, to our voters, for 5 people to make that decision.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you. So I would just point out, sometimes the incumbency isn't a benefit. In Sunnyvale's recent election, I think 3 of their incumbents were defeated. So it's not necessarily a given thing that it's just because somebody is appointed that they're going to be elected for 2 more terms. I think we're seeing, particularly like I said, our neighboring city, there were, that was pretty surprising that many incumbents got defeated. So I think, people are paying a lot more attention. They're going to be looking for who's doing a good job, and who's not. And in terms of the hours, the time that it takes, it's not just the hours in this meeting, it's all the time to prepare. It's, we'll be honest, the council member who is no longer sitting next to me, didn't cover a lot of the other committee meetings. And, there's a lot of other regional bodies and things like, committees, lots of things. So I would say that the gap of time that would have to be devoted is more, and I would welcome having somebody else in for 6 months. And, like I said, there have been instances where somebody who's been appointed, and actually, I think we only have 2 people who have been appointed, not 3. I think the rest of us all were elected. I'm in favor of making an appointment. I think we can make, I think that is, if we can't come to an agreement on a candidate, I think let's try. The charter says you shall appoint. I would support going into that process, asking everybody and anybody who wants to apply, whatever their background, whatever their ethnicity, whatever their religion, their genders, gender identity, whatever. Come on down, apply, and let's see if there's somebody that 5 of us can agree on. And if not, then the seat will be open.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember O'Neill. There's one thing for sure, we're going to have an election in November. There's no doubt it's happening, it's there. But I don't agree with Councilmember Mahan, and excuse me, we've closed the public hearing. I don't agree with Councilmember Mahan, and neither do 80% of the voters in Santa Clara. So please don't interrupt me. I have a right to speak, just like I had the courtesy of letting you speak. So if you could control yourself, please, and let me finish. We appointed a charter review committee, and that charter review committee did a tremendous amount of work on this issue. And it was an issue that they brought up themselves, and they brought it to the council, and we all approved it unanimously to put it on the ballot. So this is something that, it's in the charter. We follow our charter. It's in the charter. 80% of our heavily turnout voters said that we can do this. And for those, just for the record, the 2 of us that were appointed to our positions, we also were elected. So just to make that clear, we're not sitting here purely as appointments. We had to face the voters, and we do have to face the voters. If we put someone in that seat, they're going to have to face the voters as well if they decide to run in November. We have many people in this community who would like to serve. Many people that have run multiple times, people that have worked really hard, And I think it's time, and our charter allows, and 80% of our voters said yes, so I think it's time for us to give someone a chance, and we should do it fairly quickly since we have to do it within this 30-day period. Thank you. Any other members of the council? So the motion on the table is to not go to an appointment process. So I'll be voting against the motion. Please register your votes. And the motion fails 4-2. Is there another motion for the appointment process?
30 days, right?
Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you. So I'd make a motion that we do direct staff to begin the process of soliciting applications for qualified members of the community. That would mean people who are electors and I guess residents of the city for the charter, for them to, and to set a date. I'm not sure if there has to be a minimum period of time within, as soon as is practicable, to arrange for an interview session with the city council that would be open to the public, and that we advertise that, as many vehicles as we have possible, that an appointment is being solicited, and to encourage people to come and apply, and that the council will see if there's a candidate that they can, that 5 out of the 6 members of the council can agree on. And then they would have to serve, they would, if they so chose, they could run for election again in November, but they would not have to.
City manager, can we talk about timeline? Well, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Could we put a timeline on that so we can start disclosing it to the public?
Well, the action would need to be taken before June 14th. We're already in the 30-day period, and so we would be looking at establishing a process for council action on June 12th. We would add that item to the agenda.
And on the solicitation process, I have to remind you of what's in our report. The outcome of the ballot measure, Measure A, may have an effect on who might want to consider running for the, who might want to consider submitting for the application. Because if Measure A passes, then we'll have 2 districts, and the district that will go first in November will be District 1, which is the area south of El Camino.
Would that mean that we'd have to appoint someone from District 1 for the 6-month period?
If you appointed somebody from outside that district, that person would have to move to District 1 if they wanted to run for reelection.
Okay. All right. So the 12th of June, so we would have applications due when?
So I'm just looking at the calendar, and I think it's up to the council, obviously, of how long they want the application process to be open, but in order to give enough time, I would suggest that we have it open for at least 10, maybe if we open it like Thursday maybe of this week, then we can have the applications due, I would say, May 4th or 5th, so that we can get,
June.
I'm sorry, June 4th or 5th, so that we can get it into the agenda packet that is going out June 7th or 8th for the June 12th meeting. So let's say we open it Thursday and we close it June 5th.
Okay, so you'll put an application on the city website and have it available in all our regular places?
Right, so you have an option, I'll just share that we can mimic it off of the Board and Commission application that we currently have, or you can seek letters of interest, which is how we served, had the Charter Review Committee members appointed through a letter of interest. So you can either do it that way, or we can issue the Board and a similar version of the Board and Commission application. So that's just an option for you to consider.
Councilmember O'Neill, did you want to put those dates in your motion?
So the application period would open this Thursday, which is the 24th, and that the applications would be due by June 5th, and the council would then review those applications and interview applicants at the regularly scheduled council meeting of June 12th, and then see if we can achieve a proper, the needed level of majority.
Right, and is that all right with the second?
Yeah, but I have clarification.
Okay. First Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just wanted to point out, the difficulty with having 6 people on the dais right now. I mean, there have been the Planning Commission position, how many weeks did it have to be continued? Because there were not enough people here to, we didn't have majority vote. And then there was one other action where it just was a deadlock and it failed because we didn't have a majority vote. So we really need 7 people on this dais in order to be able to conduct business. And so I'm happy to support this motion and just be able to conduct business the way the voters elected us to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill, I still have you.
Oh.
More additional comments?
Oh, no.
Okay, Councilmember Davis.
So, Brian, I had a clarification. Is this citywide? Because we didn't draw the map, or what is,
I mean, can you pick
the
someone?
applicants, can they be citywide?
They can be citywide, but
Okay.
because we have this intervening possibility that Measure A could pass, if Measure A passes, then if you were to select some, you'll know on the 12th, so that'll inform you as to whether you would like that to occur or not. But and any applicant would know that if Measure A passes and they're from District 2, if they wanted to run again, they'd have to move to District 1.
Okay. And then the city clerk, we put these applications out in different languages. Do we have 5 or 6 languages that we put these applications out in?
We can.
I think we should.
Mhm.
That was my clarification.
Okay. Thank you, that was good clarification. Okay. Any other comments from anyone? All right. Thank you, sir. Please, yes, sir, thank you. So we have the motion in progress. Please register your vote on the motion. And that passes 4-2. Thank you. All right. The next item we have on the agenda is adopt an ordinance. This is the second reading of 1980 establishing district boundaries and sequencing related to implementing by-district elections in Santa Clara. City Attorney?
Again, this is the second reading of the ordinance. This would establish officially establish the districts in the event that Measure A passes. If Measure A does not pass, this ordinance will not go into effect.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer?
I just wanted to add that at the direction of the council, we did do the translation services of the educational mailers that we put together in the following languages: Korean, Vietnamese, Spanish, Tagalog, Portuguese, Hindi, and Mandarin. And those will be available on the website.
Thank you very much. So any member of the council have any questions, want to talk? Vice Mayor Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just wanted to go ahead and just make the motion to adopt the ordinance number 1980, establishing a district boundaries and sequencing relating to implementing by-district elections in Santa Clara.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and second. Councilmember Mahan.
Apologize. You said that the ballot is going out in all of those languages, correct?
So the Registrar of Voters
Right.
handles the translation services for that. I was referring to the educational mailers that the city produced.
Are going out in When are they going out? Because I haven't seen any.
Oh, so they're going to be, they were finalized today,
Oh,
and
okay.
so they'll be available on the website in the next day or two at most.
Will they be mailed like the English ones were?
So we have put together a third mailer that has the translation services identified on it for the languages, the 7 languages, which refers them to the website so that they can read the full informational, educational
Translated
materials.
ones aren't being mailed.
Not all 7 languages are being mailed.
And yet this
But
is
a
the measure
flyer
that's
is
supposed to
going to
encourage
be-
diversity, and those who may be diverse won't be able to read the mailers that have gone out.
So there is a mailer that has all 7 languages with
understand. I
a
understand.
listing in that language that directs them to the
We're
website.
imposing that extra burden for someone who wants to be educated to go do a second step, whereas others do not. It just doesn't seem fair.
Okay. Keith Adams, come forward. Welcome back, sir.
Apologize for my outburst, but I am really upset. Anyway, it's my understanding that since 2011, this council has engaged various select committees to look into attempting to impartially formulate a fair method of establishing a 6 voting district boundaries within our city in order to have 6 council members who will represent all of our city, not just one part of it. And you must admit that most of you are in one significant part. I want them to actually represent our city, being actual residents of the district, knowing and experience day to day the problems and things that go on with traffic and crossings and children trying to get to school and back, aircraft, crowds at places. I'm not in those places. I'm better off than most. I live in the Prune Ridge, Kiley area, but I do suffer Apple. I'd like them to be able to bring that information to the council meetings and to this dais and those experiences. In my opinion, the current proposed solution to this need is that the June ballot does not solve the problem. It does nothing to negate the threatened or pending legal actions against this city and council. A repeated excuse for not going forward with an immediate 6-district voting arrangement is that the city of Santa Clara does not have, or not appear to have, any potential district that is home to any particular ethnic group. We do have a few enclaves. I notice one of them has been judiciously mentioned out of our 1-2 deal. I'm sorry. Our city already has 4 districts set up by our project, which we call citywide cleanup campaigns. There's 4 regions there to start with. All you need to do is split couple of them up and make 6.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
not a big job.
Thank
Make
you.
sure that all the homes are included.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't have any other speakers. If you'd like to line up.
Steve Chesson, President of Californians for Electoral Reform. I know you can't see this from where you sit, but this shows how that a 6-district plan would provide an opportunity for at most one Asian American to be, for Asian Americans, so only like, for one Asian American to be elected in one district, whereas the plan in Measure A in the ordinance that you have to adopt would allow opportunities for Asian Americans in both halves of the city to elect candidates of their choice, and in the north part of the city for Hispanics to be able to elect a candidate of their choice. So clearly, the ordinance that you're about to adopt in Measure A would be much superior than a 6-district plan. I also had a question for the city clerk. It's my understanding that although voters do notify the registrar of voters of their language preference, that information is not made available to the public, and I would believe that you would not be able to actually obtain that information. And I don't know if that's true or not, but if you couldn't obtain that information, there's no way you could do a mailing to households in the language of their preference. And so putting what you are doing, putting the language, the different translations and say, if you speak this language, go to this website, et cetera, on a single mailing that goes to every household is probably the best way to get that information out to people so that they can find information in the language of their choice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve? It's always weird when white people talk about what's good for non-white people, especially when they use the words like superior. So that's kind of disconcerting. But I guess I just a question about this is: it seems incredibly premature to set district lines before the voters of Santa Clara make a decision. You talk about, well, the 80% and how important it is that voters have turned out and spoken on stuff. So I guess I'm just curious, with the act of doing this before the June 5th election, if that potentially seems somewhat misleading to the voters, potentially, because they can say, well, the city just adopted an ordinance that made it 2 districts already, and I'm a voter that may not know all the full information because I don't always get the full information, and it's only a few days between now and June 5th anyways. I'm just curious why this now, at this specific time? If that answer may have been, provided at a different meeting, I apologize for not knowing it, but that just seems like a big red flag to take an action like this before you've let the voters. And one thing, I am a former Santa Clara resident. I was on the 2011 Charter Review Committee. It seems that people like to brag about that, so that they know what they're talking about up here. So I figured maybe I should do that as well to get a little more merit and credit to some of my comments. But anyways, thank you.
I remember you were my appointment. City Attorney, would you like to answer the question as to why we're doing this now?
That was explained at several previous council meetings.
Uh-huh.
The reason that we decided to go ahead and go through the process is because under the California Voting Rights Act and state statutes, there's a specified process which we wanted to follow to allow for the maximum input of public hearings, hearing from public of all different ethnicities about how these lines should be drawn. And we wanted to make sure that we had sufficient time to have that public outreach, have people show up and give their opinions about how these lines should be drawn. And we needed that to be in effect in time so that if Measure A passed, we could in fact transmit those district boundaries, those precinct boundaries to the Registrar of Voters so we could actually have the election take place in November, as would be the desire of the people who had voted for Measure A if it does pass. So it was all done for the purpose of having maximum outreach to the public, and this was all a bottom-up driven process from the public back to the council. The council really had very little input into the process of how these lines were drawn, other than to simply hear from the districting committee and get this done in time so that if Measure A does pass, it can be implemented.
I don't actually think we had any input into how the lines were drawn. It was Charter Review, well, it was the different committee.
It was
Anyways,
the
okay.
districting committee that
Thank
had the
you.
input.
That was a different committee.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I know it's late, but first I want to say that in no way, shape, or form did I ever say that Jerry Marsali should have been replaced. What I said was that it's difficult to govern with 6 people. So please don't misquote me, and don't make an accusation that I would say something like that to Jerry, because I knew him as well. Second, We did, as a charter review committee, and I was on 2 charter review committees, and I don't think I'm any smarter than anybody else, but what I do have is the privilege of letting you know that we spent hours and hours and hours going over this. This wasn't done in a 3-hour meeting. This wasn't done on a weekend. This was done over the course of 3 months. I believe it was close to 3 months. And there were times we would go late into the evening where we would get kicked out of the public library because we kept debating and debating. And one of the things we looked at was would it make sense for there to be 6 districts? How could we draw that up? And that's where we started, was how would we draw it up? What would it look like? What are the demographics? And no matter how many times we looked at it, there was no way to appropriately section out 6 districts. We are so diverse in where people live that that's why we came to the conclusion that we do need to be mindful of the lawsuit. We do want to address the lawsuit in our recommendation. We do and did go to ranked choice voting. We did divide it up into 2 because we felt that that was the most appropriate way of being able to have districts that would be fair from a demographic perspective, because we couldn't come up with another way to divide it up. So when people say, you should have 6 and you're doing a disservice and so on and so forth, I can tell you that myself and 12 other citizens spent 3 months trying to figure out how. And at the end of the day, you have our recommendation for a reason. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else who wants to speak, you can line up now. Thank you. Welcome back.
After the witching hour, what can I say? Here we are. So, I was on that charter, I was on the charter before, and I represent a very minor minority. Australian, how minor can you get? Very few of us out there. However, there are some of us that vote, and we love the idea of voting. In fact, we insist that everybody votes in our elections. It's an amazing process. It's a great process, and we have preferential voting too, which is a fabulous system, which is kind of, let's hope that goes through too, because it actually allows people to have more than one vote in a sense. So the interesting thing about the Charter Review and this whole discussion about Measure A is we had an open system. We were available for everybody to come and talk about it. And it's more than interesting that so few people came to those meetings except the Charter Review people themselves. Holy smoke, what happened? I don't know. We didn't get the notice out to people. Perhaps let's talk to the city. Didn't you get the notices out? Probably not. Maybe it wasn't wide enough, wasn't on your website, it wasn't up on the... I don't know, but we made it sure that people knew about it, and we have people now complaining about our recommendation. I'm sorry, bad luck. You could have come, or you could have sent your representatives and had them talk. You didn't, and now you want to complain after the fact. It's a little bit like you're sorry you didn't come to the party and you want to cry over spilt milk. Bad luck. This is what we came up with. Suck it up and vote on it, and vote in the right way, the way that this charter came up with it. We debated it for hours, and that's the fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Sam Hagag here. I'm not going to belabor the point, and I'm really happy that this is finally coming to a second reading and that it'll be finalized, and voters will be able to vote either in favor or against it on June 5th, and that's the beauty of democracy. So whatever happens on June 6th is what we're going to have to live with as a city. I did want to kind of, Steve Chesson brought this up, I put this together. This is based on the numbers from Dr. Gobelet. And these are the numbers that likely would be used either in a court of law, or on this side, it shows the 2 districts, which is what's on the ballot. And one of the interesting things, I don't know if it's interesting, or maybe the people who are pushing for 6 districts are intentionally misleading folks, is they talk a whole lot about ethnic diversity. And for the gentleman who is saying that it's all just a bunch of white people, telling what's good for minorities, I am a minority. Maybe my skin color isn't that dark, but I am a minority. And what's really interesting is that the folks who are pushing the 6th district plan talk a whole lot about giving ethnic minorities a voice when you'd only, at best, get 1 out of the 6 seats to be an Asian American, based on the data. This is real data. And what they don't seem to understand is that they are actually disenfranchising the Hispanic American community. Because in the plan that Measure A proposes, that you can vote for on June 5th, and I hope that everybody votes yes, this is the only plan and the only scenario in which Hispanic Americans would have a seat at the table. So in their quest for 6 districts, in their claim to bring ethnic diversity, they would rather have 1 Asian American versus 2 Asian Americans and an Hispanic American. So I encourage everybody to vote yes, and I'm very happy that you guys will push this through tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome back.
Howdy. I'm sure you missed me. I can't think of 2 better representatives for this, for the yes on Measure A, than the racist white dude here and suck it up buttercup Aussie lady. Because that illustrates everything right there. That really does. The guy who says that we should only speak American, which is not an ethnicity, not a language, just side note there, really sums up to me what people feel about Santa Clara, the elections, Measure A. And then, hey, you didn't participate, suck it up, sucks to be you. Aussie lady also sums up the process of how people feel disenfranchised. So when people are saying, hey, a lot of people who are people of color frequently work more than one job. It doesn't leave a lot of time to be able to go to a bunch of community meetings. That usually is a luxury of white folks.
Please speak to us. Thank you.
I wasn't. I was just illustrating the majority of white folks in this room who have the luxury of being here since 7 or, I don't know, poor choice decision making, I don't know, but we've all been here a long time. And that's the thing, is that if you want more people of color involved, you have to involve them. You have to put things on different days, offer them on different days when people can be involved. And so you can't sit there and say, suck it up, you didn't show up, we're gonna get our way. And you can't sit there and stand up like a racist in a room. And when somebody stands up and is a racist, and you don't hear the majority of the room go, oh my God, that is a sign.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor for the second reading. Please register your vote. Has everyone registered their vote? Should we do it manually? Do a hands vote? Okay, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item we have is the public hearing regarding action on Catalina residential project located at 1375 El Camino Real, and I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning. I am Andrew Crabtree, Director of Community Development. And thank you, Mayor, members of the council, for the opportunity to provide you with a presentation on this project. The proposal in front of you is a request first to adopt a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and then to rezone a subject property that's 2.23 acres located on the north side of El Camino Real, just to the west of Monroe Street near the site. And then to approve a vesting tentative subdivision map as well that collectively would allow the future development of the site with up to 54 townhouses. The property shown in this aerial photo was until recently developed with 4 industrial buildings, commercial buildings, with automotive-related businesses. Recently, the city did a grant permission. The site was, those buildings were demolished to avoid a nuisance condition on the site. And the site is adjacent to industrial commercial uses to the east, west, and south, and then multifamily uses as well to the north and south. The project in particular was mentioned would consist of 54 townhouse units as envisioned. Those are organized into 6 buildings. You can see here roughly of equivalent size. The project does propose to have 8 live-work units along the portion facing El Camino Real. These buildings would be 3 stories, approximately 41.5 feet in height. You can see that the project would take access from Civic Center Drive. There are 2 drives that come off. In this type of townhouse development, generally you have alleys with garages for each of the units that front onto those alleys. Each unit is proposed would have a 2-car garage, half of which would be a tandem configuration, and then half side by side. Pedestrian access is sort of around the perimeter of the site, and generally in the areas shown on green on this. There are 14 guest parking spaces and a common open space area included in the proposal. So there, as part of the project. And I'd note, it says here there's 17,900 square feet of landscape area. If you sort of add up all the open space, it's 21,400 square feet. These depict the proposed elevations for the building. The top 2 are the frontage along El Camino Real. And as mentioned, there are some live-work units. So sort of the darker portions of the ground floor reflect where those live-work units would be. They have more of a storefront type frontage. The other building is representative of what would be on the interior of the site. The one in color at the bottom is sort of a typical interior facade. And then the one in black and white, I didn't have a color version of that, is sort of the garage door frontage that faces onto the alleys along the interior project. And I'd note that these facade, the facade that's for the live-work unit is one of the changes that the applicant made as the project went through the process in response to comments from the city and from our third-party design review. Following a discussion between the City Council and Planning Commission about the need to bring in additional resources to assist us with the design review process on a pilot basis, we selected a couple projects and did bring in a third-party architect to provide comments, review the plans, and see if that could assist us in our design review process. Their comments were included in your packet. This is a summary. Notably, amongst them, the third-party architect did recommend that the applicant remove 2 to 4 units from the site plan in order to add a more usable amenity open space. He did raise a concern that the live-work units along El Camino Real would not have sufficient commercial presence to be successful. Did recommend additional articulation to the building facades and break up the long roof line, have more of a, each unit to have sort of its own roof identity. Recommend more landscaping and some other changes to the plan. Just to summarize what has changed with the project as it went through our design review process, that initially was 53 units. The applicant found an opportunity to add a 54th unit, so it did gain a unit as it went through the process. Initially, there was no common open space area on the plan. The applicant did add approximately 2,000 square foot usable common open space area by removing some of the guest parking that had been shown initially on the plan. The project was redesigned to have more of a front door type. The units that sided onto Civic Center Drive were sort of redesigned so that they had front door porch oriented towards Civic Center Drive, so that the sort of, you know, from the perimeter of the project, we have sort of a facing out aspect to it. You mentioned the change to have glazing on the live work units. And then initially, I think there was a single building all along El Camino Real that was divided into two so that there could be a paseo in the middle to sort of facilitate a pedestrian movement through the site. The analysis, the site is a designated community mixed use, which allows standalone residential use. The proposed density is within the range. The project would have 24 units per acre, and this designation allows a range of 20 to 36 units per acre, so it's within the range. And it's consistent with policies in the general plan that speak to sort of how orientation of the project to the street, transition of uses, mixed use, and so forth. However, there was a key concern of the staff in our analysis as we went through this process, that the project did not include adequate amount of common open space, amenitized open space for the future residents, to provide sort of a convenient opportunity for future residents of this project to have sort of an outdoor area where a little more space for some, you know, whether it be a tot lot or a picnic or some kind of recreational use in proximity. Particularly, this is an issue of concern with townhouse type projects. These units don't really have backyards like a single family neighborhood might have. And so without sort of the opportunity for a very convenient, you know, if you imagine, for example, a young family with kids, you know, they could go to a park, but having something close by that's an opportunity for some outdoor activity brings a lot of value. And we did, in looking at that, sort of look at our general plan policies, which speak to the need for adequate open space and kind of what are standards out there that are often seen in development. And so based on that, you know, staff is recommending that the amount of open space in the project be increased to approximately 3,500 square feet. I mentioned there are a number of general plan policies that speak to the need for a good amount of open space to support development. And so it's based on that we're making a recommendation. At the Planning Commission meeting on May 9th, the commission did talk about this issue. Well, first they started out by talking about this fact that the project doesn't include much commercial use other than the live work units, and they were concerned that those might get converted to a strictly residential use. They did look at the question of moving projects forward within the El Camino Real specific plan area. And staffing explained that this was one of the projects that was identified as a pipeline project and moved forward for that reason. Concern about tandem garages, lack of guest parking, and then also the number of below market rate units in the project. And the Planning Commission sort of weighed that as something that they would like to see versus would they like to see more open space, and kind of compromised around that issue in their recommendation. They had some conditions that the applicant has agreed to, and these are included in the resolution that's in your packet. Those include overhead garage storage and the townhouse units to try to encourage people to park in the space, EV charging, signage, and then a restriction to limit the conversion of the live work unit facades to a more residential look. The Planning Commission also, they recommended approval, but they also recommended that the number of below market rate units in the project be increased to 6, and that they also recommended that the amount of common open space be increased to approximately 3,000 square feet as well. And so that staff is recommending approval, but with the condition that the project be required to provide an additional 1,475 square feet of amenity and open space. And with that, staff is available if you have any questions.
Councilmember Mahan?
Yes, is it possible to increase the open space but not decrease the townhouse units? I mean, has that been looked at, like tweaking the site plan in some way or leaving that up to the applicant?
So certainly the applicant has been given the opportunity to do that, to provide more open space through whatever design means they thought would be most suitable. And in response to that request of staff, they did reduce the number of guest parking spaces. If you see in this orange box, that area had been previously guest parking, and so they converted that over to open space. So there could be some option of that. There could be a reconfiguration, some of a stack flat or a different unit type that could maintain the overall unit count and free up more land area. Those are possibilities.
Thank you. Any other council questions? All right, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councilmember O'Neill. I
Thank
didn't
you.
see you. There you are. Yes.
So, Andrew, you mentioned that this was kind of like our first project to go through having the outside review done, and I see that looked like you used Urban Field,
That's correct. Yeah.
and we had worked with them, I know, on the downtown project revitalization plan. So I know they're good folks to work with. And not to be critical, but the elevation of the particularly the frontage along El Camino, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's been much of a change, and it's still, is not particularly inspiring. So is there a possibility that, like some of the things we were talking about, the articulation and I mean, unless this drawing that's in the packet, it's in the slide, isn't the most recent one. I mean, it's some of the recommendations that they made doesn't seem like it was incorporated in those elevations. So is there could we, even if this project is approved, if in the event that it's approved, could this be the facade set back for some redesign work?
So first, just to be clear, the applicant did not respond to that comment from the design consultant. They sort of did make some changes to the elevation, but I think not to the degree that the consultant was requesting or staff would have recommended. But they'll probably speak to that. But there was some tweaking of the facade through the process, but not to the degree that was
Minor little tweaks that maybe wouldn't even be heard.
But there is, as you allude to, there is the opportunity, as you know, this is subject to a subsequent architectural review process. So I think there's opportunity for that if the council establishes sort of clear guidance at this point as to what's to be expected, then that can be further addressed through that design review process, if that's the will of the council.
Okay, thank you. That's really.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other council comments, so if we could hear from the applicant. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Mayor,
Good
members of
morning.
the council. I've always wanted to say that.
Did you bring breakfast? Here we
Oh,
go.
God, I wish.
Dance donuts.
My name is Jim Sullivan, and I'm representing SCS Development, the applicant. I want to thank Andrew for a great presentation. I also really want to thank city staff. I think that we've had, I think it was 7 PCC meetings. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but all the departments come in. Special thanks to Rebecca Bustos, the project planner, and Gloria Sciarra, as well as Gustavo Gomez and Ramon Santos on the Public Works. Those 4 individuals we worked extensively with over the past year. So I have a quick presentation, and I'm going to differ in some thoughts to the planning director. I'll use my pointer here so you guys can see. Our site is located right here, actually very close to City Hall. And I just want to point out some of the parks. We have the Civic Center, which evidently is not a park, but it's open space. You have and I always mispronounce this, the Jeff Goodfellow
Sesquicentennial
Park, which is
right.
very kind of small across the street. The Larry Marsali Park, of course, here. Rotary Park behind it. We were thrilled in the earlier presentation to find out what is being planned over on Reed and Grant. It's about a 15-minute walk. And obviously across the street, there's the Fremont Senior Center. Next slide, Corey. This is just kind of an overview. You saw the earlier rendition, the picture that staff had. Next slide. So this is kind of the site plan. It's not colored up, but I do want to point out the fact that staff, when we were going through the process, both with staff and with the outside consultant, thought that they had some great things that they had brought up. Number one, we really kind of enhanced the side elevations along these 4 units that would be siding onto Civic Center Parkway. So we've kind of wrapped the porches and had a front door element to that. Also, we've reconfigured the site. So as Andrew had kind of pointed out, we have a nice paseo that's kind of going through, and we've enhanced that with some gazebos and benches. I think that there's like I'm not sure if it's a trellis or a gazebo here and here, as well as kind of a large one in the middle. And of course, this was the kind of the reconfigured tot lot. Next slide. Elevations. I do want to point out that when we were dealing with Urban Field Studios, Frank Fuller, we spent, I wanted to say like 3 or 4 renditions of going through and tweaking both the roof lines and the elevations, popping out to kind of come. And I realized that, different people can look at it and, we feel that it's going to be a very attractive project. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one. These were the units, so these would not be the units that would be facing onto El Camino. These would be the kind of the 4 buildings on the interior. Now the next slide. So these are the units, and you can see it's basically a 9-unit building, and each building would have 4 kind of live-work components. And essentially, one of the things that we did is the city has some guidelines as far as glazing. So, I mean, the doors going in, the amount of glazing kind of in the front windows. It's kind of hard to see here, but, and then a little bit of, non-lit signage on the top. And that was something, I think that originally Frank Fuller had expressed, he said, is this going to be kind of like an optional live-work type unit? And I said, quite frankly, I don't think that that really works. But because most people will say, no, I'll just have the residential. That's not an option that we're coming up with in talking both with the neighborhood, the Old Quad, and the Chamber of Commerce, 3 of the groups that we went out to. They thought that there was a need for this, and so this is something that is going to be built like this. The person does not have an option to change it. Next slide. These are just, kind of a footprint, if you will, floor plan of the units. Next slide. So project benefits. Providing 54 opportunities for new home purchase in an area that's in dire need for more housing. This is my presentation in front of the Planning Commission. Providing 5 units within the subdivision that will be made available at BMR price. Currently, I think the below market rate price for a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath unit is about $365,000. It equates to about a $700,000 discount off of what we think that market rate is going to be. So obviously, providing 5 of those would be about a $3.5 million benefit to the public. 10 existing trees that are no longer existing on the site that were in poor to fair condition are being replaced with a total of 141 trees. Reduction in the traffic trips, and this was a question that the Planning Commission had brought up. Obviously, there's no buildings out there right now, but what the David J. Powers, in doing their initial study, look at the amount of traffic that's basically created from 28,000 square feet of the commercial space. They compare that to the traffic that would be generated with 54 townhomes. It's a net reduction in both the AM, the PM peak hour, as well as the total average daily trips. Replacing 3 to 4 businesses that were, in our opinion, operating in a less than pleasing aesthetic structure with 8 new business opportunities that can provide revenue to the city as well as services to the public. Next slide. Again, I kind of already touched on the vicinity to the other parks within the area. Also, strangely enough, the project is going to have a reduction in impervious surface area. The payment, so right now, the park fees that we would be paying per unit, based on the 54 units at 24,000 and some change, is would total 1.326 million. We were not seeking any kind of a credit, nor do I think that we're entitled to any credit based on the small amount of parkland that we're providing. And the payment of approximately $280,000, that's an estimate, based on that $700,000 gap between affordable market rate and market rate, or excuse me, affordable price, affordable moderate price and market rate would be a payment of $280,000. And then next slide. This was the Urban Field Studio project review. I just wanted to point out that their initial thing was for the site plan that they were looking at the time was saying, hey, you could reduce 2 units to create kind of a small park. The dwelling units could be removed from the southern end of one of the north-south buildings. And then they went on to say, even if 4 buildings were removed from originally it was 53 units, 22, you would still be at 22 dwelling units per acre, which is above the minimum in the city's general plan. Next slide. So this was the site plan that they were looking at. And as you can see, what we did actually is we didn't lose any parking spaces. We actually transferred these parking spaces over to this side. We reconfigured our this is the bioretention along this area. And with the help of the fire department, we were able to kind of square off this curb return, relocate these parking spaces over to here, and essentially fill in the park space that would have been the footprint of 2 units. Now, the question as far as going from, so this plan originally was 53 units. In dealing with, I mentioned Gustavo Gomez's name, early on in the project, there were some underground utilities that are out in El Camino Real. And one of the things that the city had requested of us was to create a new street frontage along the front of this building. This is kind of in response to what the El Camino Real updated specific plan is going through. So instead of having, I think, a monolithic, it's either a 6 or 8 foot sidewalk that's existing right now, the curb line's going to stay where it is. We're planning on having a 4-foot planter strip immediately behind the curb, and then a 10-foot sidewalk on the other side of that planter strip. So we're actually creating more right-of-way for the city along El Camino. The problem is there is a sewer line that's very close to that curb. And if we plant trees or landscaping in this new parkway strip, the city would like us to relocate that sanitary sewer line. And in order to relocate the sanitary sewer line, which is about $350,000, we actually have to move it on the other side of the storm drain line. And because the storm drain line is kind of in the way, we have to relocate the storm drain line as well. So it's 2 lines that are being relocated at the cost of about $700,000. And so the city said, or at least city engineering said, you should relook at your bioretention, and maybe there's a way of picking up an additional unit in this corner, which we were able to do. So we thought that we had done something great in the fact that we picked up another unit, which helps offset a very expensive off-site cost that we have to do, as well as creating a approximately 2,100 square foot park for these residents.
Okay,
Next,
you're well past your 10 minutes,
okay,
are you?
okay.
I'm sure
Last,
you can go on longer, but
well, yeah,
would you like
if
to
I can
sum it
just,
up?
yeah,
here?
or actually, I think that there's some members of the public that will speak, and then will I have a chance to come back up after that?
Let me see here, according to the schedule. Yes, you will.
All right,
You will be able to come back up for rebuttal.
okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
If there was any
Oh,
questions
there
of
might
me.
be questions from the council. Are there any questions from the council on the presentation? Okay, Councilmember Mahan.
So your revised plans, kind of summarize it for me. How many units
So it's a total of 54 units that we have.
and how many are going to be BMR units or,
That was going to be at my last
okay?
point. I was gonna
And
make.
what's the size of the open space or common open space area?
So the total common space area on the entire site is, 21,000 square feet or 21,400 square feet. But really, I think what staff was getting to, and we talked about this at length at the Planning Commission, the tot lot area is about 2,100 square feet.
What was it originally?
It was nothing originally. I mean,
Okay.
we just had basically the Paseo. This
All right, and staff recommendation was a little over 3,000?
staff would like us to do about, I think, 3,500, Andrew. And Planning Commission said, well, split the difference, bring it up to 3,000. But in order to do staff or Planning Commission's recommendation, we would lose 1 unit, from what the Planning Commission wanted, we would lose 2 units from what staff wanted, without completely redesigning and coming up with a entirely new product.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Any members of the public? Jennifer, do you have any cards on this? Please come forward. Excuse me. Welcome back, sir.
All right, since I was publicly slandered, I just want to make one point.
You can come forward and speak in the
Thank you.
microphone. Yes, sir.
I'm definitely not a racist. I've spent extensive time, bordering on years, working in Africa, also in Sudan, part of Sudan, and also in the Far East, and particularly with Pakistan, even as late as 7 years ago. So I currently work and share time with colleagues who are of many races. And on my own street, where I help everybody, even the aged, and I'm 84 myself, I want to tell you that I help all people. And if you can go around my neighborhood and ask, what do I do for people friendly? I introduce new neighbors, which our city should give out information for the new people so they know what the rules are. But anyway, thank you.
Thank
and
you,
thanks
sir,
for
and-
this, and I appreciate your perseverance tonight.
We appreciate it, and that name calling wasn't fair, but members of the public believe they can name call. So I'm sorry about that. Yes, sir.
Hello.
We appreciate you setting the record straight. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Nick Caspar, Santa Clara Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber fully supports this project. We heard it several months ago, I think even before that. And in going through it, SCS Development has really brought the community and engaged the community throughout the entire process. In looking at it, it really adds the much needed housing in Santa Clara. It has sufficient parking, which I know is a major issue in Santa Clara now. It has a reduction in traffic for that space. And we really think that it's just a project that's truly beneficial for Santa Clara. In regards to the park, I think we looked at that and that was one thing, but what we saw was that with so many parks in the surrounding areas, it's more beneficial for us to have additional housing units than to have a small park there compared to when there is parks in the walking distance around there. So that was it, and I really am glad to support a local development, a Santa Clara Development Agency, and SCS Development. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for staying so late. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'll try to be quick. I'm Adam Thompson, President of the Old Quad Residents Association. Citation Homes did reach out to us, and they came to one of our general meetings and presented the original proposal of 53 units. Our members really like the idea of the for sale housing. It's something we've been asking for a long time from developers. So to add 53 for sale homes in the Santa Clara stock is really important. The work-live units were very interesting to a lot of the Old Quad residents. They like the idea. I mean, a lot of these new developments are coming in, knocking out some of our retail on El Camino. And what's happening is the new retail they're putting in is much higher cost for the same tenants to try to come back in. This might give opportunities to Santa Clara local residents to buy and own their own destiny as a small business owner. So we really want to hopefully see this kind of project, be successful. The only major concern of the residents and myself is the architecture. I mean, one of the things that we've been hearing for years is, we're building beige boxes. Beige boxes, I've been lining El Camino, and, architecture is the thing that the residents see. They don't see the inside of the units. We don't see the top parks. But we see the buildings every day as we drive by. And to have, another project like this, I mean, you look at the elevations on El Camino, it's very hard to see that those are work-live units. And to make this project successful, really want to see something more, interesting that would drive people to want to go and see if there is a business there. I mean, a great example is the Walnut Factory that got converted into, some lofts on Lafayette. It's a really cool, interesting building. It drives people to want to live there. So we do support the project, but we would really like to see the architecture cleaned up a little bit. Thank you.
And thank you also for staying so late. Anyone else? Okay, so applicant, go ahead. You have,
So it's not a rebuttal. I loved what the
Oh.
two gentlemen said, but I just wanted to get right towards the end. Corey, next slide, please. Or last
3
slide.
minutes, 5 minutes, 5,
No, next.
3? Okay, 3 or
It's a
5?
tot lot. Next. Okay, so my request, so one of the things that the Planning Commission that was very interesting was one of the commissioners, you have their, the recommendation that they made, but the original motion actually that was made by one of the commissioners was, would you be willing, if we approve the project for 54 units, and you're going to provide 5 units as affordable and then pay the in lieu fee for the 4/10 of a unit, what about potentially going up to a 6th unit? And is my understanding under the code, actually, then one of the people said, how about making them do 7 units? And I think the city attorney at that point said, no, you can't force them to do more than what they're allocated to do. But you could have them, if they voluntarily wanted to go up to 6. So Mr. Schott, who was with me, said, yeah, we would do that. Now, the recommendation ended up getting kind of changed, and they said, well, let's lose 1 unit and say we recommend for 6. So what we would like to do, or our request is the development with 54 townhouse units, including the 8 live-work units. As Andrew had pointed out, we'd include the garage storage components as an option for all units, the guest parking space for the rideshare companies. 4 guest parking spaces we think would be adequate to be reserved for business patrons of the live-work units, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, 2-hour time limits. And assuming no units are lost, we would voluntarily agree to round up our BMR requirement to provide 6 moderately affordable housing units on site. So that's our request that we would be asking council to make, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions from council members? All right.
And Madam Mayor, I just want to say that on
Just
the
don't want to sit down, do you?
I don't.
No.
I
energize
just
your
because the
money.
one recommendation that I think that the commission also made with regard to not changing the facade unless they had to go through a PD amendment, they don't have the ability to change the facade. They would have to go through a PD amendment. So it's going to be built like that. So I think that that was a superfluous kind of recommendation from the Planning Commission. on changing of the
Okay, thank you
architecture.
for
Yeah,
that.
once it's built.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Councilmember Davis?
Are we ready to entertain a motion
Yes.
before I fall asleep? Oh, I'm sorry.
Close the public hearing
Close
first.
the public hearing. Motion to close public hearing.
I was hoping we could clarify one of the statements he just made.
So should we wait to close the public
Yeah,
hearing?
I would wait
Okay,
1 second.
just hold off on that. You can maybe get
The
it ready.
the offer to go up to an additional unit, would that include not paying the in lieu fee that would have been a proportion of that unit?
Yes, so in lieu of making the $280,000 payment, which would be the 4/10,
Right,
we would provide an extra unit. So essentially, it's
one more BMR.
one more BMR.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
I
better.
just wanted to make
Yes.
it clear.
No, thank you
Because
for that, yeah.
I think that the ordinances, as I read it, the applicant may do one or the other.
Yeah, I think we'd rather have the unit. Anyways, okay, so now we can close the public hearing. Please register your vote. Okay, and that passes unanimously. Councilmember Davis?
Now, can I do a motion? This is written down, so please bear with me because I'm very tired. So I want to make a motion to move to adopt the negative mitigation to approve rezoning to planned development and allow 54 town units, including 8 live-work units, and approve the tentative map under the conditions. The developer to add an option for all homebuyers a garage storage component. 1 guest parking space shall be allocated for the use of rideshare companies and pre-wired for EV charging stations. A minimum of 4 guest parking spaces reserved for business patrons of the live-work units with timed parking. And last but not least, accept the applicant's willingness to round up for the 6 BMRs, affordable housing units.
Motion second. Any discussion on that?
I still have a quick,
Councilmember O'Neill?
thank you. I didn't quite understand that, the comment about the facade, and you can't do that because then that requires a PD amendment. Andrew, could you explain that for me, please?
So my understanding is that the Planning Commission wanted to include a condition in the zoning that mandated that those live-work units fronting on El Camino Real have, sort of the commercial type frontage that was shown on the plan, and require a change to the zoning if they were to vary from that. So they just wanted to make sure that was very clearly established in the zoning as a requirement. They were concerned that, if that didn't get somehow documented in the zoning through a subsequent architectural review process, at some point now or in the future, it could get converted somehow to a more residential look, and it would not maintain the intent of having a sort of commercial use there.
Okay, so if we still wanted to, we mentioned this going to architecture review, but if we wanted to, so it's within our purview still to make some suggestions about what we want to see done, or make some general comments about, articulating the facade a little bit more, or, I don't know what suggestions you might have. It's just, like I said, it just, it didn't,
But I
taking
think-
into account the comments that Mr. Thompson made about another beige box.
And I think it's two issues, both related to the architecture of the facades. But if on the first issue of the Planning Commission recommendation, if that was something that the council, wanted to include as a condition of approval, certainly could. And then secondly, on the sort of following on our earlier conversation, it would be probably more appropriately direction to staff that when this comes to the architectural review committee process, that the city, that you're looking for a greater degree of articulation of the facade, more variation in roof line and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Teresa, you want to send this to architecture review? Is that what you wanted?
Well, I think it has to go there anyhow.
It goes there anyway.
But like that, before it goes to architecture review, that they look again, maybe at some of the suggestions that Urban Field made and look at what could they do to make the facade a little more distinctive, maybe with some different materials or articulation, as Andrew mentioned, and um, maybe something with the roof line. I would say go back and look at some of the comments from Urban Field.
Okay, so just
Okay.
add, looking at, when it goes to architectural review, getting this, Jennifer? When it goes to architectural review, just look at some of the facade treatments?
You're right, that we would want to see some changes in the facade before it goes to
Okay.
architecture review.
Does that make you happy if I say architectural treatments?
Yeah, I think we get the gist of it.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for staying so late. A lot of this, I'm really sorry we had to continue things from last Tuesday. So we're all paying for it now. Next item, we're going to continue to, no. kidding. I really wanted to see your face, Mr. Moss. Okay. We'll just continue that one item until 3 weeks from now. No. All right, so the next item we have is also a public hearing, and it's to approve a general plan amendment, rezoning and vesting tentative subdivision map, and adopt the mitigated negative declaration for the Moonlight Lanes Townhomes project located at 2780 El Camino Real, and the public hearing's open. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. So this project in front of you is also a proposal to develop townhomes, in this case 58 townhouses. Includes a general plan amendment to change the general plan designation of the site to medium-density residential, and then a rezoning of the 2.87 acre site as well. The site is located on the south of El Camino Real, just east of Kiley Boulevard, on the former Moonlight Lanes bowling alley site. You can see the structure there is developed in its current condition. There's the 36,500 square foot bowling alley, 171 parking spaces, and some trees around the perimeter. Adjacent uses to the north is the Moonlight Shopping Center. To the south, you have a mix of single-family and townhouses, single-family residential to the west as well. So project description, project would include 58 three-story townhouses at 20 DU per acre, a little bit lower density than the last example we looked at. Common landscaping, common area landscaping of this project has a little over 37,000 square feet of open space total, about 3,000 square feet of usable open space, which works out to 52 square feet per unit. There'd be a new private street that comes off Kiley. The townhouses are organized in between 4 to 7 units per building, so there's sort of a variation in the size of the buildings and then also in their orientation. So as you go through the project, and then there is only a EVA only, emergency vehicle access to the north to the existing alley along the northern edge of the site. There are 116 parking spaces, provide in 2-car garages for each unit as well, a mix of tandem and side-by-side, and 20 visitor parking spaces. This is within the El Camino Real focus area. The overall intent, the focus area is to redevelop El Camino Real. Because there's a general plan amendment, looking a little bit more at the context and how this fits into that context. The subject site is currently regional mixed use, and I think that designation came about because this site, along with the Moonlight Center to the north of it, were collectively seen as a redevelopment opportunity, sort of an underutilized older commercial center. And I think that designation was applied across the whole site. But looking at the medium density residential designation, it's intended specifically in our general plan to be used in cases of a transition between mixed use and single family. So in our analysis, this is an appropriate place for that transition. The site also is currently zoned community commercial, which reflects the bowling alley use. And so rezoning would allow for the residential. Project timeline, this project developer has been working through the process for some time. Originally there was an application for a rezoning for apartment building. Through the multiple hearing process, and as you can see, multiple community meetings, the project was reconfigured, re-envisioned as a townhouse project. And so there's been considerable community input. Just to summarize some of that, the prior initial project was just a general plan amendment to eliminate the commercial requirement. That was replaced with this new one, which reduces the density. You go from a rental to a for sale product type. In place of 150 apartment units, we're now looking at 58 as the proposal. The prior development was going to be 6 stories up to 74.5 feet. The new proposal is 3 stories, 37 feet. The setbacks are similar. On the short end, the apartment building had some areas where the building pulled back more, and you had up to 100 feet setback. But typically, it was about 19-foot setback, and this project sort of varies between 13 and 22 feet. So just looking at the general plan consistency, I spoke to the fact already that the proposed land use designation is consistent with the general plan. There are also policies in general plan about neighborhood compatibility, a transition of use, quality of design, and so forth that the project would be consistent with. Looking at the elevation and the quality of the architecture, you see here that one thing that we look at with townhouse projects is each unit sort of have its own architectural identity. So there are sort of differentiation in the facades and the roof lines that relate to the different units to help give that identity. There's variation in roof lines, sort of an accentuated front door, which is something, again, our general plan calls for. You do see the alley-loaded garages and some effort to break up that facade as well with changes in the plane. And then looking at sort of variation between buildings, you see some change, particularly in color, but some in massing as well to help overall give the project some architectural variety. So staff, is looking at our general plan consistency, compatibility with the neighborhood, site design quality in our considerations. The Planning Commission focused in their discussion on a number of issues. They did talk about the amount and location of the common open space in the project. They looked at the traffic analysis that was done, sustainability measures, the amount of affordable units. And they ultimately recommended 7 conditions of approval. In this case, the applicant has agreed outright to 3 of them, which would be wiring, something related to the wiring for electrical vehicles in the garage, a rideshare parking space, and overhead storage. And then a 4th condition from the Planning Commission was to look at replacing 4 of the guest parking spaces in the center of the site with a centralized green space area, again, another common open space with amenities for the residents. This project has a bit larger common open space area, but it's to the side, and so they were looking at the increased benefit of having one in the center of the site, and the applicant has said that they would make that change if directed by council. Then there were 2 additional conditions that the applicant is not in support of. One is a requirement that the CC&Rs for the project include a subsidy of transit passes for interested residents, and the other was to increase the number of below market rate units from 5 to 6. In this case, the applicant is proposing 5 and to pay the in lieu fee. So with that, staff is recommending approval with the conditions that have been agreed to by the applicant, and those were incorporated into the resolution that you have in front of you. Staff is available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Is there any questions? I don't see any from the council, so if we can go ahead and hear from the applicant. Or should we make a motion to continue right now?
Oh.
All right. Mr. Moss, welcome.
Not feeling the love here. Hi.
Welcome, Mr. Moss.
I'm John Moss with Prometheus, and good morning. Unlike the last presenter. I did not look forward to saying good morning as opposed to good evening. I don't know why he was
Neither
so
did
proud
we,
of that.
so,
I can
yeah.
imagine.
Not awake.
So staff has done an awesome job, an excellent job, a comprehensive job in terms of giving an overview of our project plans. We agree with everything that they said this evening, but we especially agree with the last statement, which I think they said a recommendation for approval this evening. We agree with that entirely. And we are appreciative of the Planning Commission. It was written in the staff report that the Planning Commission has recommended approval, but the one thing that was missing was that it was actually unanimous approval at 6-0 at Planning Commission, which is unusual in this day and age, at least for us, so we did celebrate that. As a result of the comprehensive nature of the presentation by staff, I'm going to be extremely short in my presentation, especially given the lateness of the hour. Hopefully that will be appreciated. We're here to answer any questions that you will have. And we also have our design architect, Dahlen Group representative here this evening as well to be able to answer any questions related to the design. So just real briefly, we made a lot of changes since we last came to the city back in 2016. When I say a lot, I mean it wasn't just a little bit of refinement here and there. So as mentioned earlier, went from 158 units down to 58 units. That's a 60 some odd percent, 63% reduction in the units. Going from rental to for sale was a pretty significant step. And we did that based on community input and council input as far as preference for sale housing. The heights were dropped from 6 stories at 75 feet down to 3 stories at 35 feet, a 50% reduction. We think this provides a great transition from what will ultimately be probably a high density retail and mixed use development at the shopping center directly in front of us out on El Camino, going back to the single family neighborhood behind us. The transition's a lot cleaner than it was before in our other plans. Community outreach, yeah, we had a lot of community outreach, and this was all brought up by planning staff. So you can see that we had 3 meetings when we had the apartment development starting way back in 2015. We're in year 3, technically year 4 as far as our project plans are concerned. As you can see, the community outreach that we had once we switched to townhomes changed pretty radically. We had 3 other meetings, one very recently in April of 2018 with only 5 attendees. The other 2 meetings, we actually polled the neighbors and neighborhood groups that came to those meetings, and overwhelming support for the townhome project as opposed to the apartment project. So that's really all I have to present, and open for any questions. And again, we have our design architect here.
I have a question. At the end of Mr. Crabtree's presentation, he talked about areas where the Planning Commission wanted some additional conditions, and then there was a couple of conditions at the end that he said were not acceptable to you as the applicant. Can you address those issues?
Yeah,
Those
I
couple
mean,
of issues?
yeah, I
Thanks.
mean, the one issue that, the one that's most significant that we were in favor with, and we thought the Planning Commission came with a great idea, and that was to eliminate some of the additional parking stalls that we've got. We've got 20 guest stalls, only 12 are required, so we've got 8 or 60 some odd percent more than what's required. So the idea was to convert, I think it's 3 or 4 of those stalls to open space, and we're more than happy to go ahead and make that change to the plan. The 2 areas that we took exception to, one of them was with the affordable housing, and the other one, I don't know if I recall. Transit
for the
passes,
transit
yeah,
passes.
yeah, the transit passes. I think specifically the Planning Commission said that the HOA would be able to make that decision if they wanted to go ahead and require them of the buyers. We'd love to have our buyers make their own decisions as far as whether they have transit passes or not. I didn't feel like we as a developer should be obligated to go ahead and provide transit passes for the buyers of the homes. I don't think that the cost of the transit pass is going to be an impediment for the decision making of those buyers, given what they have in the way of income availability to be able to take public transit should they decide to do that. In terms of the affordable housing, we're meeting the city's requirements. We're not asking for any variances from that. I think our project, unlike the last project where they were willing to go ahead and add an additional unit. I think they ended up at 54 units. I think they started at 54 units. We started at 158 units. We're down to 58 units. We've gone 3 years. We've got an empty building out there for the last 2.5 years. You know, from a feasibility standpoint, we feel like that is something that is onerous and burdensome, and at this stage of the game, we strongly prefer not to go ahead and do anything except for meet the city's requirements, which
You'd
is
pay
what
that
we're doing.
incremental fee?
We pay the incremental
Okay.
fee, which is still a significant amount
There's
of
no
money.
waiving of any
No,
fees
not
or
at all. We're
costs
not
or
asking for
anything?
any variances
Okay.
whatsoever to the city's policies.
All right, any questions from the council? All right, seeing none, is there any member of the public? Please come forward. Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Josue Garcia, and I'm representing the Santa Clara County Residents for Responsible Development. And this morning, we were planning about bringing our members, but we knew that that meeting was going to be into the late hours or early hours of the morning. So we decided not to bring our members because they have to go to work shortly. And so do I, actually.
And so do I. yeah.
Yes, and so we are just here to support the project. My job is to keep projects in the pipeline so our members can go to work. Once one project finishes, we have to start the next one. We think this is a good project for the community. The applicant has agreed to many of the requirements from the Planning Commission, because I was here as well. So just real quick, we just want to express our support for the project. Thank you very much.
And thank you for staying. Thank you. Welcome back, Adam.
Thanks. I'll be real quick. So I went to most of the community outreach meetings throughout the 3-year process, from 158 units down to 54. I also had the unique opportunity of growing up on El Sobrante Street, so I still actually am friends with quite a few of the neighbors. As you can see, there's nobody here. I mean, the last meeting I came to when it was 158, it was packed. I mean, and everybody I've talked to on Crowley and El Sobrante and around that area have all said that, you know, this is for sale housing and the density seems right. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, and people weren't shy about sending us emails and calls and everything when it was the 150 units, and I don't think we've gotten much on this at all. So, okay, the applicant, do you have any additional information? All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion second, to close the public hearing. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Council, is there a motion for approval of the project?
I don't think I can read anymore. Can somebody read?
City Attorney, can we take all the actions in one motion, or how would you recommend?
Yes, move.
Well, we'll soon find out,
We'll soon find out.
won't we?
Second,
I believe we're talking about alternatives 1, 2, 3, and 5, correct?
correct.
1, 2, 3, and 5?
Yes,
Yeah, under the staff recommendation.
yes.
That's the alternatives.
Are we good with that? Okay. Everyone's good with that? Everybody understands what that is? Okay, please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Congratulations, and thank you very much for staying so late. But we'll continue on. Next, we have various actions on a purchase and sale agreement and other documents as necessary related to the sale of the north-south parking parcel located at 4911 Great America Parkway. And there's assessor's parcel number there. City Council and successor agency to the former redevelopment agency of the City of Santa Clara. Ms. Shikata?
Good morning. Several weeks ago, staff presented a request for the city council acting as successor
Could I just
agency.
interrupt, please?
Yes.
I think you need to convene both the city council meeting and the successor agency meeting.
Okay, is that
Jennifer has
just
to
a
do that.
simple statement that we're
I think
convening?
the,
Jennifer has to do that.
if the clerk would do that?
I'll just confirm that we're going to open a joint meeting between the city council and the successor agency.
And confirmation of a quorum? Yes.
Confirmation of a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms.
Oh, it's okay. So several weeks ago, staff presented a request for the council acting as a successor agency to consider approval of a purchase and sale agreement with Jamestown Realty for the purchase of the north-south parcel. The north-south parcel is a approximately 9.4-acre parcel located off of Great America Parkway. It's owned by the former redevelopment agency. By dissolution law, the redevelopment agency, the successor agency, is required to sell its assets, and all assets then are distributed amongst the taxing entities. At the time that we presented the request, the council referred the action back to staff, expressing its interest in possibly purchasing the property. So since that time, as the city attorney announced a little earlier today, that the council has authorized an offer to be made for the purchase of the property. The terms and conditions upon which that offer would be tendered is included in the packet tonight. There's a form purchase and sale agreement, as well as two separate resolutions for the council consideration. One resolution is a resolution of the city council authorizing the city manager to make an offer on the property and authorizing some minor amendments to the form of purchase and sale agreement in case that proves necessary. The second resolution for council consideration is the adoption of a resolution on behalf of the successor agency, which would accept the city's offer to purchase the property, and to authorize the city manager as the executive officer of the successor agency to make minor amendments to the agreements as may be necessary. So if the council authorizes these actions, and then this would be brought forward to the oversight board with a recommendation for approval. The oversight board is scheduled to meet next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. There was a substitute resolution that was put on your dais a little earlier on tonight. It had some cleanup language on there just to make sure that we took the appropriate action.
Okay, any questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve these items, all of them? Motion second. Any discussion? Seeing none? Are we clear what we're voting on?
Yeah, yes, no. Alternative action.
Is it possible to put the action on? I noticed that the recommendation is missing from the agenda.
So the recommendation, it is missing. So there was a supplemental report that was issued yesterday. And so I don't know if the agenda reflected the new recommendation, but the staff recommendation, if I can read portions of it, would be for the council to note and file the May 8th report on the purchase and sale agreement with Jamestown, and then to adopt a resolution that would authorize the city manager to make an offer to purchase the north-south parcel and at the price authorized by the city council in closed session, which is which is on the agenda language says a price competitive with the Jamestown Realty, which is similar at a price authorized by the city council in closed session, and authorizing the negotiation and execution of the purchase and sale agreement in the form attached. and approving and authorizing the city manager to make minor amendments to the agreement. So that's the first action on behalf of the city council.
And that was the motion?
Right.
Oh, that was Councilmember Colstad. Kathy, second. Okay, any questions on that? Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Do we have additional actions?
Yes.
Okay.
There's one additional action, and that would be the council acting as the governing body of the successor agency to the former redevelopment agency of the city of Santa Clara, adopting a resolution. The resolution would approve the purchase and sale agreement and the transfer of the north-south parcel from the successor agency to the city of Santa Clara. And it would authorize the city manager and executive officer to execute minor amendments to the agreement as necessary in coordination with the city attorney.
That's a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Any other further actions? No? All right, thank you. We're still moving along here. City manager, executive director reports?
Thing to report out.
Nothing to report. Okay, so the next joint council and authorities, stadium authority meeting is Tuesday evening, May 29th. And just to let everyone know, we've been going for 9.5 hours today. And this is really, I don't want to see us have meetings like this in the future because it's too long. And it's too taxing on all of us, including the city staff. So this is a result of a lot of items that we continued from last week. And we just, at least we got through them all, but it's really not fair to have everybody stay this late. So if we could please adjourn in the memory of the victims of the shooting at Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas. We offer our heartfelt condolences to the families and friends of the individuals who lost their lives during the shooting at Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas on May 18, 2018. Our hearts are with the victims, the injured, and their loved ones. Let us please have a moment of silence in memory of the individuals who lost their lives during this terrible tragedy. Meeting adjourned.